We are the Liberty Intelligence Organization Network.
And this is our news recap show. I am your host, Ricky Phillips. Now what I want to start off by mentioning is that Bilderberg 2013 has officially begun. They are gathering, the globalists, the elites, are all gathering in Watford, England, the United Kingdom, in Watford, UK, at a hotel called the Grove Hotel. I would encourage anyone who is able to get there and to cover it and to be on the lookout for Bilderbergers, aka globalists, aka the guys trying to build a new world order. I unfortunately do not have the funds or the time to go and cover it. I wish I did. I actually wish it was being held in Chantilly again because I could actually attend that one just because it's a little closer to me. Traveling across the Atlantic Ocean is a bit much for somebody who only makes about $100 a week. So all that being said, let me get into the main topic of this special report that I put together. Now, as I've mentioned multiple times before, these are old special reports I put together a long time ago. I got tons of new stuff I gotta sort through and put together and piece together for special reports, and at the same time, I'm working on a number of other things. I'm actually thinking about starting some animated shorts, but I'm not entirely sure that that's going to pan through. And I'm also working on a documentary that I won't publicly announce until I've gathered more sources for it. I assume, just based off my scheduling, that it'll probably take about a year maybe to put the full documentary together and to get all the sources I want and everything like that. But stay tuned for that in the future, and just a little forewarning, I'm going to create other channels to upload the documentary. Just in case it gets taken down. So I will, when I get the documentary together, I won't be uploading it to the main channel here. I'll be making some sub-channels to upload that to once it's all said and done. And as I mentioned before, I'm working on the shorter documentary that I'll probably have up sooner than that. Now, with all those announcements being made, let me get into the main focus of what I want to talk about in this special report. Now, usually in the earlier phases I was covering broader topics, big topics, international, national, tons of stuff, New World Order, talking about all that stuff. But now I want to hit some local stuff because we got some globalist activity right here in my hometown. Now, if those of you who don't know where I come from, you can go ahead and check out my Operation Paul Revere film, where I introduce myself and where I come from. But for those of you who don't know, I am from Germantown, Maryland. Right in Montgomery County, and the reason I bring up Montgomery County is because that's what I want to talk about here in this special report. So if you're not from Maryland or Montgomery County, I'm going to give you a little bit of a history about my hometown and my area, just so you can understand the development of this narrative I'm going to portray before you. And it is ultimately going to tie in together with the greatest threat of all to our individual liberty, which is the New World Order, in case you couldn't guess in that brief pause what I was going to be bringing up. But basically, Montgomery County, Maryland, it's in the southern central area of Maryland. It borders the District of Columbia on the northern, really the northwestern side. The northeastern side, I think. I'd have to look at a map. It's north of Washington, D.C., let's put it that way. And I'm just a few miles north of the border of D.C., but all that being said, what I want to talk about is the connection between UN Agenda 21 and my home county, and its the connection to this global plan to create mega cities and to force people into mega cities and to free up the wilderness areas, really the farms, the fields, the mountains, the forests, the lakes, the rivers. They don't want anybody to be out there. They want to compile everybody into mega cities where there's like skyscrapers and you're living in a tiny apartment box. And ultimately they want no families. Children will be born from the state. The state will grow children in their laboratories or only have specific people designated as mothers. But ultimately, I'm jumping ahead. You hear in the Liberty Movement and the Truth Movement a lot. We talk about UN Agenda 21. And it's ultimately their environmental scheme, where they're using environmentalism and this green movement and this move for sustainable environmentalism as a cover for creating an authoritarian control structure. where they can close businesses down by saying, you didn't meet the environmental regulations, or making it near impossible to even start up a business because you're unable to provide for the economic or the environmental restrictions and regulations, like you got to have this type of facility, the toilet's got to function like this, the electricity has to function like this. You got to meet all these requirements even if you just want to start up a business. Unless you're a globalist, if you're a globalist, you're usually implementing those regulations to prevent anyone from becoming your competition. So ultimately, UN Agenda 21 is the consolidation of power mechanism for industrialists and corporate guys in the military-industrial complex, so that they can pick and choose which companies and which industries are allowed to remain, and to shut down the companies that aren't part of their agenda. Now, all that being said, Agenda 21, if you look at it, if you want to look at UN Agenda 21 on a local level, like I did, like I'm going to be explaining with this report about my home county and its connection with UN Agenda 21. UN Agenda 21 in your locality, in your local area, it won't be called UN Agenda 21. Like if you go to the county council, or you go to the city council, or you go to the the House of Legislators, or whatever governmental system that your local community has, if you go there and ask to see if they're part of UN Agenda 21, or to see UN Agenda 21 documents related to the county or the city or wherever you are, whatever you're looking for, that's not going to be what it's called. Instead, what you got to do is you got to read UN Agenda 21. You got to get to know the points. You got to get to know the main aspects of this global agenda. And then what you got to do is you got to look for environmental sustainability programs going on in your locality, and they give them different names. They don't title them, Environmental Stability Program for this area, UN Agenda 21. It's not titled like that. For example, in Montgomery County, the UN Agenda 21 styled Environmental Sustainability Program is actually called the Wedges and Corridors Plan. That's what they call it in Montgomery County. Now, when doing my research, it may not be 100%, but I think I remember seeing that the counties also that surround Washington, D.C., there's another county in Maryland, and I think there's 2 more counties in Virginia that border Washington, D.C. And if I'm not mistaken, every single one of those counties has their own Wedges and Corridors Plan. There's a Montgomery County Wedges and Corridors Plan. There's a Prince George's County Wedges and Corridors Plan. And I forget what the other 2 counties are. I think it's maybe Loudoun and Fairfax. But either way, they all title their environmental sustainability programs Wedges and Corridors Plan. Now, what is the Wedges and Corridors Plan? Well, as written, you can go ahead and at least the Montgomery County version is online. You can go look it up. It was thought up in the 60s, right around the same time that environmental sustainability stuff was going on in the UN. Now, UN Agenda 21 didn't come about officially until the 90s, but all the talks and the summits and the meetings that created UN Agenda 21 started really back in the 50s. So, as these plans were developing, UN Agenda 21 was the coalition of the finalization of these plans. But lots of other plans grew out of it at the same time. So Wedges and Corridors Plan is UN Agenda 21 style, but it came really before there was an official UN Agenda 21, even though Agenda 21 really dates all the way back to the beginning of the UN, but it didn't have this name. It just got this name for it in the 90s. But all that being said, they call it the Wedges and Corridors Plan, and what it says, and I do apologize, I'm sort of jumping through, not in the order I wanted to go, and I was going to give a brief history of my hometown and Montgomery County, and if I get to that within the time restrictions. Again, I'm not limited by time, but my phone will only let me record a certain amount of time, and sometimes when I've been trying to film some special reports, they end up being too long, just because I'm trying to go through so much information. And it's amazing. I have 4 talking points I wrote down, but in order to explain the talking points, I got to go into so much more information about all these things, the main topics I want to cover here. And there's limited time, so instead of wasting more time talking about this, let me get into what the Wedges and Corridors Plan is. The Wedges and Corridors Plan is, it ultimately says what it is to design, well, it's the growth of the super city. As I mentioned, Agenda 21 talks about building these mega cities, these super cities that they pack people into and force people to live in these high-rise, small apartment complexes where they're easily surveilled, easily controlled, easy to understand and manipulate. And at the same time, it frees up the open areas because the globalists, they often complain that whenever they want to go to a mountain or a park or a lake or a beach, they complain, there's too many people here, there's too many people here. Again, that's their common thing, is there's too many people. They're all about population control. The globalists, they even write and boast about in meetings and in speeches they give and in books they write that they plan to reduce the Earth's population to somewhere between 85% and 99%. I often limit it down into 85 to 95% of people when I talk to people about their population control plans. But at the highest levels of the globalist pyramid, they do talk about reducing 99% of the population. Their ultimate goal is around 500 million, somewhere within that area. It's like 300 million to like 800 million, in that area of population for the planet Earth, of human population. That would be their ideal world in their view. I think that's sick and disturbing. I think we need billions more, and I think we ought to start advancing to other planets and spreading to the stars. I honestly think that is the destiny of mankind, is to populate the universe. We have this misconception that God just created the Earth and He created man to live on the Earth, but I think and I'm sorry to break off into religion a little bit, but in the Creator's view, the entire universe is the world that the Creator created. And we're just a starting point here on Earth. We got to spread out. And that's not to say if the Creator didn't also start other people out somewhere else, but at the same time, the whole alien stuff, the only reason they bring that up, the only reason that's gotten very popular is because now they're trying to convince people, and I'm digressing here, but it's got to be explained. Now they're trying to convince people, as in the movie Prometheus from last year. I never fully saw it, but I've seen bits and pieces of it, and I've read a couple articles about it, and watched some short videos of it. And basically that movie was trying to argue that mankind was created by aliens, and that once mankind reaches a technological level equal to the aliens, mankind will have become God. And that's the whole argument behind them trying to convince us that there's ancient aliens and all that stuff. But I'm digressing here, going off into the globalist mindset and trying to explain that a little bit to people. But the main topic here is Montgomery County and the Wedges and Corridors Plan and how it all fits in the UN Agenda 21. So the Wedges and Corridors Plan in Montgomery County, and as I mentioned, it's in counties. And I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure when I was doing my research, again, I did my research a while ago. So I probably should have brushed up on it before I decided to film the special report. But I had some time to sit down and film it, so I decided I better take the opportunity that I got when I got it. So the Wedges and Corridors Plan, again, it's in all the counties surrounding Washington, D.C. And basically what it says is along the interstate corridors, and again, in Montgomery County, it's I-270, is the interstate corridor that runs away from the Capitol Beltway, is I-270, runs through Montgomery County, and the Wedges and Corridors Plan says along the corridors, and the corridors they consider to be the interstate highways. Along the corridors, you're allowed to build businesses, you're allowed to build homes, you're allowed to construct things. But in the wedges of the county, the areas beyond the corridor of the interstate, you're not allowed to do anything. Those are supposed to be environmental stable areas where you can't build anything, you're not allowed to have any business, and and they highly regulate and tax any farmers who are still surrounding those areas out there. So basically, that's it. Wedges and Corridors Plan is Agenda 21's name on the local level in my area of Montgomery County, Maryland, which is where I'm from. Now, a little bit about Montgomery County, and just to add it in before I switch gears here, just to tie it in with the environmental stability and this whole UN Agenda 21 stuff. We have a bag tax in Montgomery County, Maryland, and it came about 2 years ago. They passed it into law, and I work in retail, so whenever I work as a cashier at the store, I do all types of stuff at the store, but whenever I'm a cashier or anything, I have to check people out. I remember when they first implemented the bag tax, people come through the register, I'd ring them up, and then at the end of the transaction, I have to say, do you want a bag? And people would look at you like you're crazy, like, of course I want a bag, but then you say, well, I'm going to need 5 cents for that, for each bag that you want. If you want 3 bags, it's 15 cents. And so when it first implemented it, and at the same time, that gave me the opportunity to open up a discussion with people. Because a lot of people were upset by that. Like, I don't want to pay 5 cents for a bag. This is ridiculous. Why do I got to do that? And again, I'd point out to people, this isn't like a company policy. This is, Montgomery County is forcing us to do this. So if you have a significant problem with it, call the county council and let them know that you think this is an unjust, just blatant criminal law where they're just extracting money from businesses and people. Ultimately, I'm not sure how it works entirely. I'm not sure if they tax the business that does the plastic bags and then they hope to make up the revenue by selling the plastic bags, or if they check and actually audit the transactions to see how many plastic bag sales there were, or how they actually tax for it. But they do, some way or another. And they always claimed it was because they wanted to, keep the environment safe and get rid of the litter. The litter on the streets and stuff like that. Well, that was their justification for it. But I oftentimes wanted to point out to people that because of all the environmental talk over the years prior, plastic bag companies had already started producing their plastic bags to be biodegradable. So they already degrade naturally to some extent into the environment. So they were already on the path of making bags environmentally friendly, so to say. So they're claiming it's for the environment, even though there might actually be more nutrients and minerals for the soil to make the plants grow better. Maybe if the bag biodegrades into the soil, because as most people might be aware, the soil levels in our country are depleted of their minerals and nutrients. So and maybe, but again, maybe that's the real reason. Maybe the plastic bags do help the environment when they biodegrade. So the globalists are like, well, we can't do that. We're trying to destroy the earth. Literally, they are, and sometimes they write, if we don't take over, we'll just destroy everything. And sometimes they're like, we're trying to take over, but there's always the chance that we might just end up destroying everything in our attempt to take over. And then they laugh about it. They're like, and it's like, whoa, you guys are freaking nuts. You're crazy. And it's like, they're nuts and crazy. They're wild. They are Twilight Zone out of this world demons, really. But I don't want to digress into all types of explanation here. I want to get into a little bit about the history here. So those were the main points I wanted to make about the Wedges and Corridors plan right here in my home county, detailing its connection to Agenda 21, a lot of the similarities between the two, how it's possibly being used as an implementing force to build a super city out of Washington, D.C. by consuming the surrounding counties into the District of Columbia from Maryland and Virginia, just consuming them, not officially like with redistricting or voting areas or anything like that, extending the city limits, but physically making it like one continuous city. If you're driving out of the Beltway, just one continuous giant city is ultimately what it's becoming. And I literally watched, and here's a little bit about the history. When I was born here in Germantown, Maryland, and grew up, it was a small neighborhood. There was a local high school. There was a small general store. There was a small church. There were tons of farms everywhere. There was one little strip shopping center with a movie theater in it, and that was pretty much it. That was all there was in my town. Now I'm 26 today, so in 26 years, it's grown into a small city. And in addition, back then there was the Department of Energy in the hometown of where the Department of Energy is located. And the reason they built the Department of Energy here was because it was out in the middle of nowhere, and they figured if there was any sort of accident or explosion at the Department of Energy, it wouldn't affect too many people. Well, nowadays there's Agenda 21 style housing. Literally, like I ride my bike past the Department of Energy on my way to work. To some extent, and across the street, literally right across the street from the Department of Energy, is Agenda 21 style apartment complexes that were put up, I don't know, maybe, it's been a long time, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, they started building them, and now they're up, and I've been inside of them because I had a friend who owned them, or his family moved in, and when I was back in high school, they moved into this, Agenda 21 style housing, and they paid, I don't know how much they paid, but it was a lot of money because the family had a lot of money, and the kid would always boast about how much money they had. But they paid a lot for this little tiny room, and that's all it was. It was like 2 rooms, one with a kitchen and a living room and a bathroom, and then there was like a set of stairs that went up to like an adjacent room, and the adjacent room was divided into 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, and they paid like I want to say. I think they paid over $1 million for this apartment, right in the center of town. And again, they just built all this stuff. And nowadays, you know, like as I mentioned, you know, there's retail stores everywhere, just, you know, big buildings being built all the time. And in addition, back when I was born, there's a small community college located not far from my house. Some of you may have heard of it. It's Montgomery College. It's one of the better community colleges. It's won all these awards and it's pretty high up there. Not tooting anybody, you know, any horns here, but I went there for my early years of college before I moved on to a 4-year community or a 4-year university. But so you know, I watched this town grow into this, you know, small semi-metropolis zone. And you know, in doing research, the only reason I stumbled across this Wedges and Corridors plan was because when I was figuring out what I was going to do for my Operation Polar Revere film, I stumbled across, I was like, maybe I'll do something about my hometown. And then I stumbled across this when I was researching the history of Germantown, Maryland. Let me make sure that I covered just about everything I want to go through. I was going to go more in depth. Maybe I'll share a little bit about the history of Germantown, Maryland, that I learned when I was doing my research. It's just a little bit of interesting facts. First of all, Germantown, Maryland, back in the pre-colonial era, back before, you know, the colonists arrived from Europe, back when there was Native Americans here. Again, it was the Seneca tribe, the Seneca Nation, was in control of the area I am around the Chesapeake Bay. And Germantown, Maryland was where 3 of their hunting trails converged. So it was like, you know, different tribes, when they were traveling to their hunting grounds, the trails met here in Germantown, Maryland, and some of the roads we have are actually built along the original paths that these Native American tribes would take for the Seneca Nation for their hunting grounds. So they would meet up at this intersection, at this junction, and it would be sort of like a trading market where they would, you know, exchange furs, exchange meats, exchange, you know, textiles and jewelry and whatever else they crafted out of the local, you know, nature. So then when the colonists arrived, they built a bunch of farms around here, and a Presbyterian church started up here, and that was originally where the town began, was a Presbyterian church. And then a small farming village built up around this church. And the church is actually just down the street from me, and it's been renovated a bunch of times, and it's, you know, compared to the old pictures, the original church house is still there, it's just been added onto. So it's kind of cool to compare the modern day photos of it with the old photos. But that was originally where it went. Then when they built the railroad systems, they built a train station right here in Germantown, which really became the town center. And then the town grew from there a little bit to encompass a little bit more farms, a little bit more strip malls, and that's where the high school was built, right next to the train station. And then after World War II, when they were starting to build up the Department of Energy, again, I guess it was around the mid-1800s when the train station got put in, and the town just grew eventually. And then in the 60s, after World War II, they were building the Department of Energy up here, and at the same time they started this Montgomery Community College, which was originally like an agricultural school for the local surrounding farms, but then it turned into a sort of like a science school because the Department of Energy was right there, and now it's just like one of the top community colleges around the nation. So all that built up, and then as I mentioned, then in the 60s the Wedges and Corridors plan started, and the towns leading up from Montgomery County, Maryland, once you leave the Washington, D.C., as you're heading north along the I-270 corridor, you go through Bethesda, you go through Bethesda, then Rockville, then Gaithersburg, then Germantown are like the main towns along the way, which are really being converted into almost neighborhoods of the District of Columbia. And again, it started with Bethesda. They built Bethesda all up. Then it expanded out to Rockville, and Rockville got all built up. And those of you who know the area will know what I'm talking about if you've actually been to these areas. And then they built up Gaithersburg, and then they built up Germantown. And I still talk to people, like, when I was in college, people would be like, "Where are you from?" And I'd be like, "Germantown." They'd be like, "Oh, you're out from way out there in like the boondocks?" And I'd be like, you do realize Germantown's like a small metropolis now. Like, people still have the conception that Germantown's like a small country town, when it's really been consumed by this growing metropolis that is the super mega city of Washington, D.C. And again, and I'm already seeing the next town along I-270 is Urbana. And I'm already seeing the development between Germantown and Urbana. They're just building right along the corridor. And again, that's what it is, the Wedges and Corridor Plan. And as they build up the corridor, they eventually just forget the wedges and just start building throughout the whole county. So it's really just spreading up the county. And it's like a driving line up the corridor. And then it spreads out from there. Even though they said they weren't going to do that, they do it for themselves. Just because I think they realize if they want to have a super city around Washington, D.C., it's got to be, big, a big city. It's going to be huge, because if you just look at the development, just look at a map of development around the area, and you'll see them building this super city. And it's really a composite of one original city and then smaller towns and villages that are being consumed by the growing city. So I think that's all I really got to cover, talking about my hometown and my home county, and a little bit about how the New World Order is being built right here in my home location, sort of not only just to inform people of my area, because again, I think some of my friends tune into this and they're in the local area, so it might be informative and entertaining to them, but really as an example worldwide for people. If you want to find out about how the globalists are interfering in your locality, well, here's one way to look at one thing that they're doing. Just look for environmental stability programs or laws or legislation in your local area from your local governors, from your local county councilors, from whatever, and just look at the similarities between your local plans and the UN global plans, and you will see that the New World Order isn't going to operate with like a strongman dictator. It's going to operate with a strongman council that controls the world, and then smaller local officials. Again, it's neo-feudalistic style, where there's like the king, and then there's vassals under the king. There's the dukes and the earls and the knights and whatever, and they all pay homage to the king, but they serve as the local administrators for the king in their local areas. So that's how the New World Order system, that's how they envision it working. And when I say they, I mean the globalists. So I think that's about all I got to cover. I'm probably running out of time, so I want to thank everybody. I apologize. So I'm a little tired, and after all the speaking, I'm getting a little tongue-tied. I don't have any commercial breaks to calm myself. I just gotta flow with it. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and as always, I want to remind everybody to stay safe, to stay strong, to stay free, and to stay informed.